In John chapter 4, why does the Samaritan woman talk about her temple in the past tense? And why does Jesus tell her, "You Samaritans worship what you do not know"? That seems harsh and maybe even a bit racist. And why is she one of the few people Jesus openly tells that he's the Messiah? I thought Jesus' identity was a big secret in the other Gospels. The details in this story are super easy to read right past, but once you actually know the history behind John chapter 4, the whole conversation starts to look awfully authentic. The scene begins when Jesus meets a Samaritan woman at Jacob's well. Once she realizes that he might be a prophet, she raises one of the biggest arguments between Jews and Samaritans. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you say that Jerusalem is the place where people ought to worship. This mountain is Mount Gerizim. Samaritans believed Gerizim, not Jerusalem, was the true place of worship. The Jewish historian Josephus confirms that they treated it as their holy mountain. But get this, by Jesus' time, the Samaritan temple on Gerizim had been destroyed for well over a century. Josephus tells us that the Jewish high priest John Hyrcanus destroyed it at around 110 BC. So the woman doesn't say, "Our temple is on this mountain." She says, "Our fathers worshipped on this mountain." The temple was gone, but the claim remained, and the Samaritans were still salty about it. Now, John doesn't pause to explain any of this. He just lets her speak naturally, as someone from this setting would. Jesus responds bluntly, "You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is of the Jews." Again, sounds a little harsh, Jesus. What does he mean by "you worship what you do not know"? There's more from Josephus that helps fill in the background. During the persecution under Antiochus Epiphanes, Josephus says the Samaritans pulled the "do I know you" card and distanced themselves from the Jews. They wrote to Antiochus and asked for their temple to be renamed after the god Zeus. 2 Maccabees reports the same episode, calling it the temple of Zeus, the friend of strangers. That is some pretty pathetic bootlicking. When identifying with the Jews became dangerous, the Samaritans suddenly claimed they had nothing to do with them. Then another strange detail happens in the conversation. The woman says, "I know the Messiah is coming. When he comes, he will tell us all things." Jesus replies directly, "I who speak to you am he." Wait, hold on a second. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus often avoids public declarations that he's the Messiah, something scholars call the messianic secret. John actually gives us one reason for that caution. After the feeding of the 5,000, Jesus withdraws from the crowd who try to take him by force and make him a king. An open messianic claim could easily spark a political uprising. But here, Jesus speaks openly, and the woman immediately goes and tells other people. So what is going on here? Well, Samaritan expectations help explain. Since the Samaritans only accepted the books of Moses as their scriptures, their hope wasn't centered on a Davidic king. They focused on the promise that God would raise up a prophet like Moses in Deuteronomy 18. Later Samaritan tradition calls this figure the Teheb, or the restorer, who would reveal truth and restore proper worship. That matches the woman's own words. "He will tell us all things." She's expecting a teacher, a prophet, not a revolutionary who's going to overthrow Rome. So now it all makes sense. Now, put all these things together. In the scene, it feels genuine. It feels grounded. John gets the Gerizim dispute right. The woman's wording fits the setting where the temple had already been destroyed. And Jesus' unusual openness makes sense within Samaritan messianic expectations. Now, someone might say, well, later author was super clever and researched all of this and just made up the scene. Okay, that's possible. But remember, John was written for a mixed audience of Jews and Gentiles long after these events. Many readers would not have even known the history, and John, he never stops to explain it so the readers could be impressed of how clever he is. It's simpler to see the scene as reflecting real memories from first century Judea and Samaria. So far in this series, we've seen that John gets several things right without the help of Google, Wikipedia, or ChatGPT. So subscribe, stay tuned, and check out the full playlist because there's still a lot more ground to cover, and it all paints a really clear picture. John, he absolutely knew his stuff.